A warm welcome to today's video explaining the ontological arguments that you need to understand to get the top marks, or any marks at all for that matter, for philosophy A-level. In this video I'll break down the three arguments themselves. The following video will address the criticisms. I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, consider sharing it with your classmates and giving it a like. The first argument that you need to understand is from Saint Anselm. Now, this is the first ontological argument really in philosophy, and so it sets the precedent for the form that future arguments will take. It uses a priori reasoning alone. I'm trying to perfect my Latin, as you can tell, and the argument is different to the other two because it is a conceptual ontological argument. What that means is it's based on the concept, our idea of God. Now, our idea of God is of a being of which nothing greater can be conceived of. Okay, so if we think of a being of maximal greatness, that's another way that Anselm addresses it. A being of maximal greatness, that is what God is. That's our concept of God. That's the first premise. Now, the second premise explains the difference between the two ways in which something can exist. It can either exist in the mind, or it can exist in reality. You can think of this difference as sort of Hume's fork, a priori, a posteriori, empirical, and analytic. That sort of distinction. Either something exists in the mind, like a unicorn, or it exists in reality, like a horse. Anselm believes that even a fool, even an idiot, knows that the thing which exists in the world is better than the thing which exists in the mind. Think of a virtue like courage. I could, in my own head, think I'm this really strong, courageous person, but when faced with adversity, I crawl up into a ball and cry. Not a true story. But if I was courageous and strong, and I was a good leader and I took responsibility in person, in actual adversity, then that's definitely greater than just having that quality in my mind. Even the fool knows this distinction. And so, because God is a being which is maximally great, if God exists just in the mind, then God is not maximally great. God has to exist in reality in order to fulfill our concept of God, which is that God is a maximally great being. And that means that God exists. That's St. Anselm's argument, very simply. The next argument is from Dayart, someone I'm sure we're all very familiar with and very fond of as well. Now, Dayart's argument is extremely simple. It can be written in standard form in the form of a syllogism with just three parts, effectively. And this is really good because in an essay you should always write the standard form to make your AO1 really, really quick and go straight to your evaluation and analysis of this argument. The modal argument as well, and in fact Anselm's, can all be explained quite simply in standard form. So I recommend you take the time to learn those because it will make your life really easy in 12 and in 25 mark questions. So how does the argument work? Well, Dayart's argument is a definitional ontological argument. So if you want to be really technical in an exam, maybe in your introduction, you could explain how you're going to analyse and criticise and critique the conceptual, the definitional and the modal ontological arguments. That will make you sound really technical, really informed, and it should immediately impress the examiner. Compare that to everyone else who's just using, I will be analysing Dayart's argument and Anselm's argument and Malcolm's argument. That sounds good, but you're more technical if you use the phrasing that I've just explained. So Dayart uses the definition of God. So when we use the word God, what do we mean? Well, we mean Descartes means a supremely perfect being. Notice here in this phrasing that Descartes is using his clear and distinct ideas as well. So I have an idea, a clear and distinct idea, an idea which Descartes thinks is innate of God, and that God is a perfect being. And that means that God has all perfections. That's what we mean when we talk about the definition. Now, when Descartes is writing, if you have had the pleasure or displeasure of reading the Meditations, you will know that when Descartes talks of existence, he talks of necessary and eternal existence. And so again, if you want to be a bit more technical than everyone else, if you're looking for the top marks, then that's the language that you can use to impress the examiner and impress yourself, frankly. So necessary existence is a perfection. Now, this can be explained when we think of another quality of God, another attribute of God, like omnipotence. So if God's existence depends on another being, then God is not all-powerful, because something else must be even more powerful to cause the existence of God. And so because God is all-powerful, by definition, God, not a very good sentence for spelling, was it? It follows that God has necessary eternal existence. Last but certainly not least is Malcolm's ontological argument. Now, this is a modal ontological argument, and when we talk about modal, what we're talking about is likelihood, the study of likelihood. Are things possible? Are things probable? Are things necessary? How likely are they? That's what we mean by modal. Now, this is again quite a simple argument, a standard form. This is one of the best things, in my opinion, about ontological arguments, especially when it comes to writing essays where you have maybe only got 50, 60 minutes to do them. Use the standard forms, it will help you in the exam. The first premise is that God's existence is possible, metaphysically possible. So we can conceive that God can exist. That's the first premise. The second premise is God is not a contingent being. What this means is, if God were to exist, then God's existence would be necessary, because nothing else could cause God to exist. Descartes and Malcolm here agree. So if God exists, God's existence would have to be necessary and eternal. So God's existence is not like you or me. We're not finite. We are finite, just to be clear. But God's existence is infinite, to use Descartes' language. But the two options are necessary existence or no existence for God at all. So it's a 50-50 in a sense. Now, either God must exist or God cannot exist. They're the only two options. And of course, Malcolm is trying to prove the existence of God. And so he believes that God does exist. Well, he's arguing for that position at least. So hence, this is conclusion one, it is necessary that God exists. And the reason that that's the case is because there's no inconsistencies, there's no logical absurdities with the concept of God. So, because it's not impossible for God to exist, the only other option here is that God must exist. That's the argument from Malcolm for the existence of God here. Those are the three key arguments that you must understand to get the top marks. If you've made it this far, I assume you are motivated to get the top marks. And for you, there are free resources, extra reading, and also free practice questions for you to test yourself on this content. Don't let the knowledge just sit. The best way of learning is to test yourself. So use those practice questions, see what you understand, how well you understand it, and what you still need to work on. Thank you for watching.